Lori Wallace is the founder of Career Ecology and a social innovator working to liberate heart mindfulness within the challenging and often traumatizing space of the job hunt. She began this work over 20 years ago in the space of executive recruitment in order to practice radical kindness in a post 9/11 world. I am so excited to have this conversation with Lori Wallace, particularly as we just finished our series on burnout. This is going to be a delicious conversation. So you want to stick around. Welcome to Rat Race Reboot. I'm your host, Laura Noel. And as a certified coach and former 27-year military leader, each week I provide bite-sized mindset pivots that will help you reset your mind, reawaken your spirit, and regain your control. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Rat Race Reboot. I am really excited for this conversation today. Lori and I were chatting backstage for a while, so much in common. But first and foremost, Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I feel so much gratitude. I already have my truth tears flowing. So just so you know, if this is a video and people are watching it, I might get a little teary because I'm just so grateful.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I am too. And I know that this conversation is going to be so valuable for our listeners. And I'm really grateful that you're here pouring into our listeners as well.
Thank you.
Well, I love to start out talking about you and your journey into what you do and the way you serve the world. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, if you don't mind sharing with our listeners.
Yes, in the introduction where you mentioned 9/11, it really started there. That was my huge, massive breakdown where everything was demolished in my life. I was 8 months pregnant at the time. I was an executive at a bank and I was doing national programs, telemarketing at the time before cell phones. Sorry about all that today. But it worked and we were calling people and helping them out. But I was 8 months pregnant and the phone rang in the morning. It was my sister-in-law urging us to turn on the television. And I saw the first tower on fire. And I thought, this is a horrible accident. And then I saw live, like all of us, the second tower hit with an airplane. And I realized it wasn't an accident. So I went into labor instantly. Oh. And my husband took me into the emergency room. There were so many women there. What happened is that we went into an immediate moment of crisis as pregnant women, recognizing that it was sort of fight or flight. I think our bodies became like possums and it was like, get that baby out and run. I was dramatically stopped in my tracks as a first-time new mother, seeing this happen. Such a moment for our country and for the world. And I felt deep compassion and sorrow for all the despair for everyone. As I'm home, I get on my meds, didn't lose my baby that day or birth that baby. He would have been fine 8 months, but it would have been, I had him on time, but then I was laid off by the bank because we went through just a dramatic shift with that ensuing recession that occurred with 9/11. And my husband wasn't working at the time. So this happens. And then I dropped into an autoimmune collapse. Mm-hmm. That was completely every aspect and bone of my body and piece of my body. We're talking head to toe hives, blepharitis, eyes were swollen shut. Half my face was paralyzed. I lost 10 pounds practically in just a couple weeks. My hair started to fall out. And I have this new baby that I'm breastfeeding and I'm realizing this may not be good for him. It was an extraordinary moment of loss of self. I found that the regular medical establishment was unable to help me because they just said, well, you're a geriatric pregnancy. I'm 36. Hello. Okay. So that's another conversation
yeah.
Wow. to have about that. But they just wanted to give me antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. I knew that I had to pick it up and take care of myself and become a full-blown awake woman, not a compliant woman, which is what I was, Laura, before this day. I was compliant through and through. And I had always just followed along, didn't look at ingredients, didn't ask a doctor what he thought, just, or what was going on, what was in that med. So this woke me up and I told my husband, we sold our home in a week and we moved in with my parents at the age of 36 for 3 months and acupuncture 4 times a week to bring my health back. And I said to my husband, I want to practice radical kindness in the world. That's my career path. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay, what's that? And long story short, I ended up being recruited to be a recruiter by my recruiter, moved to Oregon. But I found that recruitment was too traditionally sales oriented. It wasn't dropping into kindness. It wasn't dropping into compassion, patience, complete service. So I quit and started my own agency in 2005 to transform headhunting into human connection and flooded it with what was missing, feminine values of that deep nurturing care with also kick-ass business skills, together,
Yeah.
not bad.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was dramatic. It's the most important moment in my life. And I'm so grateful for it, even though it sounds completely traumatizing as it was. But there is Lori before 36, very compliant, and Lori after, waking up, asking the questions, leaning in, trying to be healing, and listening to my own imagination and showing up and being brave. It hasn't been easy. It's almost easier sometimes just being compliant, but it's not good for the world.
It's not. And even if we're not comfortable and there are things that we don't like when we're in that comfort zone, it doesn't feel good, but we stay there often compliant because it is a comfort zone.
Yes.
And, you doing something completely different, shaping the way headhunting and that job search, really shifts and transforms people, bringing that compassion into it. That's a new thing. And I was telling you before we recorded that I was talking with a girlfriend who is in this realm, and she desperately wants to do something like this, bringing that compassion, bringing individual values, and helping people be aware and align their values with org values, and helping organizations even become aware of their values and what are their espoused values, and just hiring in a different way. So what do you feel was missing? And you mentioned the compassion and that just radical kind of compassion. What specifically was missing in that area of expertise?
Yeah, when I came on in and initially started having these conversations with candidates, healthcare people who were looking for jobs, or we were reaching out to them to see if they'd be interested. And I found that management was walking around tapping their watch, saying, hey, it's been 8 minutes. And I'm thinking, this person's crying right now or wants to cry. I need an hour. I don't even want this kind of thing. And I'm always available. I don't ghost. You're going to learn about me that I call myself a biomimic. And what I mean by that is that I follow the successful strategies of our natural world because it has 4.5 billion years of successful evolution. And that's in engineering, and that's in social systems, that's in sustainability. And one critical area in social systems is call and response. A great deal of despair and burnout comes when we make a call. We call out and say, hey, I'm interested in you, or we've had a conversation, I'm waiting for your reply, and that person never responds. I found that in traditional recruiting, there's a great deal of ghosting that happens. If that recruiter found that that candidate did not meet their needs, then they just hung up, maybe made a promise, and let it go.
Wow.
I felt that I wanted people to know I see you, I value you, and I'm actually going to tell you truthfully what's going on so that you can maintain now your own life force, your own chi. That if you hear back from me, this position isn't a match here because they're looking for this extra degree, is that something that maybe you'd want to do in the future? We can circle back around in 6 months and see what else is there. Now this person feels fed, they have intel, they can move forward, and we've just improved their life, the candidate pool, if you call it that way. So that's better even for the hiring authorities. And that exchange of energy was really important because it was in a loop and there was no ghosting there. So call and response is one of the very first, most premier areas I think that humans really need to show up for one another, not just in recruiting, but in friendships, in partnerships, everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's seeing people as people. And I had an experience like that recently, not applying for a job, but I was sought out to collaborate on a contract. And, they said they'd get back. And then I reached out to the person who made the connection. I'm like, hey, if this isn't a good fit, it's okay. It's fine. But I'm, this is a placeholder in my mind. Can you let me know? Oh, yeah, that person's going to get back with you. And then weeks go by. And then finally I took another contract. And so I reached out to them and closed the loop.
Yeah.
I'm really busy right now. I can't take on any other work, big contracts, because I'm in the midst of one. But honestly, if we all get busy, but seeing the humanity in other people,
Yeah.
I don't know that I would go back and want to collaborate with them, even though they might be really awesome. But that connection, seeing others, following through with what you say you're going to do, that's a value of mine.
It's
And I wasn't even the person that needed to close the loop. But
exactly. And, I'm curious. I want to ask you,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear because that was really smart that you did that. And you let them know, because in a sense, there's two ways you could have gone.
Mhm.
One is you could have just said, well, I've got something else, and keep going. But the thing is, you were still leaking energy because it was open. So when you called and said, hey, I'm closing this door, I'm closing this loop because I'm over here, there's something really important that happens energetically. And I was even just advising a young person recently who has been ghosted by his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And it was very, very painful. So this is somebody in their early 20s, and they didn't know what to do. And it's just sucking the energy. And I said, you really can send that closing text, whether or not they'll ever see it, but that just says, I haven't heard from you. So, I'm going to go ahead and wish you well, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. And this relationship is no longer moving forward, even though that ghosting was probably that it wasn't moving forward.
Right.
But it was really important. There's something almost like a vampire-ish experience when the call and response is not closed.
Oh, I 100% agree. You feel it, and it's always kind of ruminating.
Yeah.
And I just need to rip the Band-Aid off and move on and do it in a loving way. I'm not,
with respect.
With respect.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because maybe people just don't feel comfortable having that conversation or having that honesty. But the best gift you can give to somebody is feedback. Not everything's a good fit, and there might be reasons, or there might not be a reason, but just that feedback. I think there's a fear around what would happen. We get inward focused. Yeah. Instead of thinking about the other person.
We do. And you just touched on something that's really, really, really important in the subject matter. And that is fear of conflict. Mm-hmm. That is almost like a viral epidemic that we have in the world. And it keeps people from sharing who they are and what they really need, or also their gifts at any moment, because of that fear of, oh, is it not my place to speak up? Or I don't even want to get into this because it might be edgy or, crunchy. If we look to the success of the natural world, conflict is every day. An animal wakes up, a lizard wakes up and ventures out from that bush, and it is living in a constant state of life and death. I mean, it could be picked up right away by that crow, just sitting on that fence. So it's learning. It's very much like a Sanskrit way. It's like you're learning to live with life, death, birth, renewal. It's animals are in it. So they're not in this kind of like psycho, like a pathology of fear, of constant dying, which there's this fear of conflict and all of this fear of what will happen next. There's more of I can keep my balance. I can work with life, with all of its life and death that's going on at any time, anything that's kind of coming into my realm. And so when we recognize, how does nature do it? Well, nature says, I'm going to go ahead and communicate some boundaries very outwardly. So, and this is actually guidance. So for example, if you're an animal or a human animal, and you're walking down a path and you see a little black, little cute thing with a big white stripe down the back, you might just say, thanks for the warning. That's not conflict. That's communication.
Yeah.
That little guy's like, this is as close as you can get. Same thing with a rattle, on a snake. Right. I often say to my husband, I'm like, hey, honey, when you're upset, I need you to just give me a rattle. Because right now that was a straight out bite. And if you bite me, depending on my mood and energy, I'm either going to bite you back or I'm going to run the other way and I'm not going to be near you for quite some time. I mean, that's really how I'm going to take that. But if you rattle like a rattlesnake would, then I'm going to stop. I'm going to take notice of what's happening. I'm going to engage in I'm going to be curious about what's going on here. And I'm going to be aware that this is a sensitive moment. So there's so much brilliance out there. As humans, we can get beyond that and recognize it as part of our relational intelligence is to invite these moments of tension and to have them be so supportive of our relationship. Whew, what a change to the world.
It really is. So much conflict when I go into organizations, and I facilitate with the Arbinger Institute, and we teach people how to have an outward mindset. And a lot of the drama that ensues is that lack of communication, or, I'm in my silo and you're in yours, and we're not sharing, we're not considering each other's perspective. And it's not rocket science. It's really simple. It's just getting in the practice of being curious about others.
It is. And feeling safe to do so. That's one of the things that I love about that animal world. Again, if I use one more example, is wolves. So when I'm teaching people how to work with their leaders and they're in a potential conflict situation because they don't know how much they can speak up, because they don't have the power, or even just a colleague. And really in healthcare, you have people working constantly in each other's space. There is no office or, cubicle to escape to. It's nurses all together, pharmacists all together, lab technicians. So they're constantly engaging each other, and they don't know how to keep everything in a certain amount of harmony. Harmony with a certain amount of acceptable disharmony is what we really should aim for, not total harmony, because, we are alive. But there's a lot of fear around that. And so I say to them when I'm training, I say, well, let me teach you how to do it like a wolf.
I love it.
Like, uh-oh, what are you saying? I said, no, wolves actually are probably the most impactful pack animal, kind of like a herd animal, a pack animal, that we have a lot to learn from. They are in their environments. They do not exploit or destroy or oppress their environment. They are involved with whatever they need for food, just in the balanced way, kind of always with the animals that are weak or older, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. They take care of their young. They beautifully raise also all of the wolves to be competent. And wolf packs are actually led by an alpha and a beta. That means a masculine or a male and a female. So they've also figured that out. So they're quite advanced. So how do they deal with conflict? How do they deal with a moment where there is one that's maybe lower on the pecking order, maybe wants a little bit of that food? And I'm a very sensitive person, so I pretend that they're just eating like a granola bar. And so wants part of that granola bar, and wants to come up towards that alpha. And here's what happens. This is the thing. So it's a 5-step process. First thing they do is they signal safety. So they drop their ears to the sort of flattened state that says, I am not here to challenge you. I actually am just peacefully in your orbit now. So that first alpha sees that, okay, I'm going to let you be here. Then they ask permission. So then they start licking like the face a little bit and just asking permission. Can I get closer? I want some of this food. I'm starting to drool, as the wolf is saying. If there's no reaction, it's like, yes, there's permission's been granted. So now they're both eating the granola bar. And then at one point, there's a check-in, though. There's like a feedback given. So that first wolf is like, is this okay still? Is this okay still? And when it isn't, the alpha will go, no longer okay. So now there's an adapting. So the other one goes, thank you, I've had enough. Okay, got it. So that double stage at the beginning of signaling safety and asking permission really helps that other individual that might be predisposed towards defensiveness, somebody that's hypersensitive because of maybe some very significant traumas that are happening in their life or happened previously, or is a deep introvert and very afraid or conflict averse, or all these things. We twice help that person bring down their own defenses so their heart resilience can come forward and they can hear the point. But then it's still oppressive unless this happens. The person who's bringing the feedback, whatever, says, what do you think? And invites them in. There are these micro moments of oppression that we instill on others and don't even know we're doing it. And wolves do it right. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. I think about even in the context of humans helping others, we have this idea of being outwardly nice where we think we're helping, but we don't really know if we're helping. And there's certain elements in that that are missing. We're not asking, one, we're assuming.
Yeah.
And then we're just moving forward and we don't even know if it's actually helpful or desired from that person. And that just, then people get offended. Then it just drives people further away.
And they'll take an attack. I had one situation where I was offering my services for free to a friend who really needed it for her significant other. And I went and kept offering more support, knowing the situation warranted it. I had such a devastating conflict with this friend by offering this love, because what I later realized and found out was that there was some prior experience where love was offered as a decoy. And when it had been offered as a decoy and the person had accepted it, then they were harmed and hurt. And that's actually part of the process of borderline personality disorder relationships. There are a lot of children raised with borderline where that is draw you in for the love, 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 and then strike you down. It's a very, very difficult, devastating experience to grow up with. And so a person who has that can be quite defensive and sensitive. And so what my actually love was triggering deep pain and abuse. And so what I learned from that person, and this happened about 5 years ago, everything that happens to me that's traumatic, I see it as an antagonistic mentor. And I feel all the pains first. I feel feelings of, in that case, of shame, also betrayal. And I mean, because it was just such to me, it felt just, oh my God, what's happening here? I feel all the feelings. I'll sweat. My heart will go up. And once it sort of peaks, then I take a breath and I ask for the guidance. And I usually do receive pretty quickly a lesson or some wisdom. In this case, it took 4 months because it was such a deep, deep lesson for me, a triple cancer, a very loving person, as you can tell, what I'm doing and, with recruiting. I didn't know that just offering support, love, gifts, or anything like that could trigger somebody to this extent. I needed to understand that always we need to ask permission. That is a deepest, most loving moment of respect. And I'm so glad to have it. So it's a good point you made. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It's, I've been coaching on my own since 2017. And once I got integrated into the International Coaching Federation, just more awareness around asking questions and not telling, not judging. I've experienced coaching where you could feel the judgment of the other person and the disappointment that you weren't doing what they thought you should do. But then you're really just imposing your paradigms and your fears and your beliefs on that, trying to anyway, on that person, which is really dangerous. And I see the parallel in what you're doing with helping people transition. I could see how where other groups or other recruiters might make it a one size fits all and be more of a telling kind of a thing. But it sounds like in the way that you engage with people, it's that compassionate learning and asking.
Yeah. It's really, really essential. Compassion is the word. We were talking earlier backstage that I call this decade the Great Compassion. And I think that we are a young species, and we are moving, with every day and every year and every experience closer and closer to hopefully heart resilience, where we get to a place where our ego mind, which is so incredibly important for survival. And I know the ego and those aspects of the brain are organized around structure and survival and analytics and speech and responsiveness and all this stuff. Although we know now that with all this testing going on in science is that speech isn't only in the left brain. Really, the brain is pretty dramatically amazing. But we have this opportunity now to recognize, I think, the true order of things in our mind or in our whole body system. And that is one towards heart mindfulness. In recruiting, and I teach mindful interviewing, and it's a huge liberation for people, because generally what happens in an interview, if you use like the metaphor of a car, you have the ego behind the wheel and the heart's not even invited for the ride. The heart's left at home and not even consulted, even in the prep or anything. And so what I'm teaching is that, hey, guess what? This interviewing is not a performance. It is a service of how can I help you know me? So we're going to get that heart in the car behind the wheel, and the ego is in the passenger seat, front seat, with the GPS open, doing its little job there and consulting. But the heart is the one that feels, intuits, that has curiosity and passion. And the resilient heart, true courage, comes from somebody who was very much led by a value or meaning that is far beyond the ego's concerns of survival. That is a meaningful life. That is a resilient life. And that really does help in this burnout that we're all experiencing post-COVID. It's time for the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you could take me on a journey of somebody who might be looking to transition. I was just talking with somebody who, in the midst of burnout, they decided, instead of trying to craft something in my current role, the best solution was to figure out the things that I love, what's important to me, what are my values, and let me find that somewhere else, or, engineer something like that. So how do you help people who are looking to transition and do something different?
Yes, I'm so glad to hear that person is going through that process. It's so interesting because the job search, and to answer your question, I'll start with saying this, is that the process of the job search is the modern day hero's journey. If you think about back in like King Arthur days, and they had to accomplish something big. They got on their horse and they had their Excalibur and they had their packet and they had their blessings from all the magicians and off they went.
Yeah.
And today it's work. I mean, work for survival, for also a sense of meaning. We know that meaning is the most important motivation. It's even beyond, sex or power or anything. We really must have that meaning. And in order to go through that hero's journey, which is very much a journey of the individual, they don't have somebody right there that's telling them what to do, but they do have some guidance and maybe somebody did mentor them a little bit, and there might be a Sherpa, which is kind of, it sounds like the way you and I show up. It's more like, hey, this is your journey. This is your move up the mountain, your hike, your sort of transcendent moment, and you'll get to the top there. It's all you, but I am with you. I have been on this walk many times with many people, and I do have a water bottle and a granola bar, and I do have an extra compass, but it is yours. It is yours. And so what I do with people when they work with me through Career Ecology for a job change is the first thing they do is they do their resume on their own, but using the responsive resume template as, again, sort of that Sherpa structure. But here is a resume that's been designed compassionately to make sure that reader, who is exhausted, by the way, by linear resumes, because you have to read through it with a pencil and figure out and count and do all this, open up a browser. We need to serve up our stories. And when we outsource our resume, we are outsourcing our story. We are outsourcing our deep dive into self. It turns out that even just doing the resume, excavating depth, questioning, and getting over the barriers of not even wanting to touch our own story, that is hero's journey stuff. It is big. It is big. I mean, even imagine doing you're probably like thinking if you had to do your own, you're like, oh, I just really want to outsource this. It's just like, it's a thing.
Yep.
And people are coming through and they're doing it and they're brave. One person, it took 4 months because the lostness from self was so significant. It took 4 months, and I had to keep bringing him back to the beginning of the trail to begin again because he kept jumping forward from the ego perspective in. And I said, no, we're excavating you as you are. There is no other voice here. This is you. Another person took 4 days because she's out there talking about herself, and she has an entrepreneurial business beside her other job, and it came very easily, to her. But everyone's somewhere in that range. And once we do resume, then there is this. And this, I think, would really relate. And you might want to call your friend back, tell her this, because she's probably already doing it. But the other thing is I call it the dynamic search. So part of our current burnout and issue in our world is linear thinking. Linear thinking is very much within the masculine perspective. And as we know, the feminine has been carved out in many ways, in every way, in the structure and the creation of our modern world. And the linear path is part, again, we want the combination of the masculine and the feminine. We want all of it instead of the suppression of one over the other. But in a linear sense, what that's done to people when they're job searching is they go down one path and one sort of type of job. But the thing is, 50% of your job search is your own engagement, what you bring to it, how you show up, and who you are. Only half. The other half is complete chance. It is complete mystery. There could be another virus pandemic that hits us tomorrow. Okay, not because I think that's happening, but there could be a weather event. There could be a recession event. Remember how quickly 2008-9, like that kind of took us all down practically in a couple months. So, and there could be a cousin that drops into the role you're interviewing. So there's a little bit of nepotism, but that's all outside of us. But the truth is, it's guidance, because our highest good is in collaboration with the world's highest good. So that means if you only go down one path, if that's not in collaboration with chance right now, that door's going to stay closed. You are going to get burnout, and you're going to lose sight of your own capacity and genius and joy for work and even life. So I say a threefold path. First one is status quo. I'm qualified. I do this work. Next one is divergent. Maybe I take those skills and I go over here. And then the third one is out of the box. Like, what would you do if you could? And some people are embarrassed to say, many of them end up getting that job.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, it's a lot of most of the opportunities I've had have happened by chance, but I was ready. So I think when you do this deep work and you understand who you are and what you bring, not just what you've done, but what you want. Yeah. And how you want to share your gifts with the world. When you get clarity on that, it's pretty amazing how you see, and that's how your brain works, how you don't see some opportunities versus others, but you see the ones that are in harmony with that. But it takes us doing the work and working with a Sherpa like you, which is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It's this vital spark. Like, what's your, and if we think about the way the world has been, because, I'm 58, I'm going to be 60 in a year and a half. And I've lived pre-phone, pre-internet, all that. And I know in a way, I'm not my mom who came of age in the 50s, but I know her story and I know what a box feels like. I've lived it and I've busted out of it as far as I can. And I'm continuing to bring that to other people. I think that the greater good for the world and for each individual is to get out of the box. It's not your box. You were born one way with a gender or where you are in wealth, or origins, or so many different things automatically put into a box to serve a system. And the system of life is served if each person uniquely shows up with what their own spark is. Like I read in your biology and your biography, which is like a biology, that you are a musician.
Yeah.
And that you obviously pursued that and brought music. I cannot imagine this world without music. We would all be completely insane.
Yep.
Beyond our own insanity already. That's amazing. I have to ask real quick, what kind of music?
All kinds of music. I sang in a rock band. I sang in a jazz band, in a big concert band. So kind of like the pop stuff, but I would say more what I probably leaned toward was the big band stuff and the pop dance kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's so fun.
R&B, yeah.
Oh, I hope you're still doing it.
I am on a smaller scale. I just told my husband the other day, I'm like, I'm almost finished with this doctoral journey. What hobbies do we want? I have no hobbies. I want a hobby.
Yeah.
He's like, well, let's create some set lists and get some gigs. Because he's a guitar player. He's a musician too.
Oh my gosh. So you guys just can go into the living room and just break out in music. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's definitely a part of me, a part of our family.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh. Can I find it on YouTube? Can I find you?
Oh, you can find the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting because I never really posted any music, but it would be interesting if we Googled my name or Air Force musician, because there used to be some stuff on there. I don't know if it's still on there.
Oh my God. That's amazing, Laura.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Well, I really appreciate you spending this time with us and sharing your gifts and helping others explore theirs. I know that those listening today gained a lot of insight based on our conversation. Is there anything that we left unsaid that you'd like to close with?
I think I will just close with, we touched upon it, but I want to say it one more time, that this really is the great compassion. So all those feelings that feel like, what's going on? Is this the end of everything? Or am I lost? Or, why do I no longer feel normal? Or, anything. We really, this decade, these 20s, these roaring 20s are shaking us up for the better. And that's how nature works. It does go, chaos always precedes renewal. So this is the time to flip the script on your sensory understanding or even desire to investigate, change, chaos, something too that feels antagonistic, that feels like a failure, any of these sorts of things. They're extremely important for the renewal of this next chapter for you and the world. So start to reframe that. It's a pretty exciting time.
It is. Oh, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
how do people get in touch with you?
Yes, come on over to Career Ecology. Those are two words, Career Ecology, no dots, no dashes, but just CareerEcology.com. And then every Tuesday, I think it is 3:30, but you can right there on the main webpage, I have just an open hour where people can come in and learn a little more, or just bring their sorrows or their joys. And I'm here to talk and listen and be supportive.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. And we'll have your website on the show notes as well.
Awesome.
But thank you again for joining us and really pouring into our listeners.
My joy and my gratitude to you. Thank you. You're an extraordinary human. All that you've done. I'm going to have to start my own podcast so I can interview you next.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Count me in. That would be awesome. Well, for those of you listening, remember, you can go to ratracereboot.com, whatever platform you listen to your podcast on. Just leave us a review. Let us know how you found the episode. We read them and we respond. So I would be grateful for that. And after all, remember, everything is created twice, first in our imagination and then in physical form. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week.